Wayne, Japan is losing another high-profile foreign CEO, this time at Nippon Shale Gas. That adds to the frustration of a lot of other foreign CEO departures. What's wrong with Japan? Should we blame Japan for that?
I think it's easy to try and see a connection between all these. Every time there's a foreigner CEO, sometimes they run into Japan's insular culture. They can't hack it, or the Japanese resist some kind of foreign best practice. But I think you have to look at each and every case and realize it's not really what's happening. In fact, a lot of the friction that's happening is because Japan is moving in the direction of better governance. The first case was obviously at Olympus. Michael Woodford got booted after discovering fraud. The entire reason the fraud was committed was because Japan's adopting Western accounting standards. Howard Stringer stepped aside at Sony to let Hirai-san take over, a Japanese, because he felt like he could speak the language. That's because Sony is trying to overhaul itself, and Howard Stringer remains the chairman. The latest at Nippon Shale Gas is a CEO who's left because he wasn't moving really fast enough to restructure a company that really is becoming international.
That sounds really complicated, Wayne. So do you think Japanese companies should want to have foreign CEOs in the first place? Do they actually do any good to them, or they actually hold back the reform process?
I think it's a good question. I mean, obviously a foreign CEO, if you bring in someone who with international talent, comes with a lot of experience and knows how to play the international game and run new rules, and maybe won't be part of the clubby old Japanese network. But the difficulty is, of course, you have managers in Japan who've risen up through the ranks together for 30 years and have their own politics. And I think that's not just Japanese. That's true in any company all over the world. When you bring in a CEO, they always have to cope with the sort of the intrinsic culture of a company. So the question is a good one. I think as Japanese companies become more internationalized, they will continue to bring in more CEOs and high-level execs who reflect their international face. But I think they're going to have to, as in Nippon Shale Gas's case, keep someone at the top who is Japanese, or in Sony's case, who can speak to the Japanese employees in their own language. I mean, can you imagine in China having a CEO who doesn't speak Chinese at a Chinese company?
Well, I would be able to imagine that. Actually, that's not a problem. The thing is, Chinese companies are not that global yet.
Right.
So overseas business account for a really small portion.
What about Lenovo?
So why would they have an international boss there?
Lenovo
so with Lenovo, when they bought IBM's PC business, they continued to let the IBM guy running it.
Right.
But it ended in failure, so he was actually pushed out earlier than he was supposed to. But also we have foreign CEOs doing really well in China. At Shenzhen Development Bank, when private equity guys bought into it, they hired an American person who used to be a deputy treasury secretary there, and he's got lots of experience. He turned around the bank. So I think it also, a lot of that depends on how well the company was doing in the first place. If you want an outsider to come in and shake things up, a foreigner is probably the best choice. Or if you are going global, then you want someone who has international experience. If your ambition is just more a domestic one, if things are doing well, why would you have just a foreign face for the sake of it, to make them look more international?
Well, maybe China needs that. Given the accounting scandals of the past year, a foreign face at least gives a projection that better governance is going on behind the scenes. Might be a good thing for those companies' share prices and for investor confidence.
So things should be really decided on merit. Last thing we want is the idea of renting a white face.